Happy Thanksgiving to all of our listeners south of the border, and welcome back to the Locked On Fantasy Hockey Podcast, Thursday edition. We are extra thankful for being here today and for having y'all. There is a lot to get to. We're looking at Underachievers. We're not looking at any bets, but we're breaking down all the fantasy news from across the league. So let's get right to it.
You're Locked On Fantasy Hockey, your daily podcast on fantasy hockey. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is going on, everybody, and welcome back to your show. It is the Locked On Fantasy Hockey Podcast alongside your co-host, Mr. Steel Roden, and of course, your boy, Big Flip Livingstone. Thank you for making us your first listen every single day. You know we appreciate that love, and that's why we're here Monday to Friday to feed you this fire fantasy hockey content, which we're going to try and do a little bit more on today's episode. We don't have any bets to get to, people. You know that's making me feel unwhole, but we will make you feel whole again with all of this information. Steel has some more trades flying out the door. We're going to break that down. There's injury fallout, some signings, and we're going to look at some of the underachievers so far this year, maybe some players that are on the come up come the second and third month of the season. We're going to get to all of that, but I want to start with today, Steel, a player that is near and dear to your heart, a guy who was actually a part of the trade we're going to break down a little later on today's episode. By the way, I mentioned the Thanksgiving. It's going to be a little bit of a short one today, people, but that's okay. Don't worry. We'll be back on Friday full swing. But Steel, why don't we talk about Nikolai Ehlers really quick? Because off air, I mentioned kind of interesting that this Winnipeg Jets team is very much hanging around in the Central, not scoring as many goals as we thought. Now Ehlers is going to be out. We know how long. Let's talk about it and the impact on this Jets team and maybe your own fantasy team coming up around the break.
Yeah, a lot like the New York Islanders from the Western Conference here. They are a very defensive-orientated team this season. Connor Hellebuyck looks like the old Hellebuyck from just a few seasons ago as well. He's been incredible. But Nikolai Ehlers, finally, we have a timetable for an expected return to the lineup for the Winnipeg Jets. It looks like he is around the 6 to 8 weeks mark minimum after undergoing the sports hernia surgery. And for me, I'm placing that around January 25th, the end of February, or the beginning of February for his return. And at that point, he's most likely have 34, 33 games remaining for the Winnipeg Jets, if that is when he does return to the lineup. So for me, just looking at his overall stats from the previous seasons, if he can get back at that time, beginning of February, and have 30 to 34 games remaining, if he can put up 20 to 25 points, because he already has 2 assists so far this season, over, around 100 shots, I think that's a pretty good season in my books if he's able to come back fully healthy, nothing's bothering him anymore, and make a big return and to, like you said, get this offensive team for the Winnipeg Jets moving in the offensive zone.
A lot to like about his offensive game, that's for sure. Say what you will about the rest of his game, he can get it done at the offensive end of the ice. That's why I'm intrigued to hear about the trade that you made that just involved him. We'll get to that in a few minutes. But very quickly also, this Winnipeg Jets team could have used a little shot in the arm of offense. As much as they are in third place in that division, they're 5th out of the top 5 in the division in scoring. Those top 5 teams, the Jets are 5th out of 5. They also are sitting in the bottom chunk of the league at power play percentage, only getting done at just over 19%. You know he would have brought a total shot in the arm to both of those areas of this team. So it'll be interesting to see what happens when he does come back, but even more intriguing to see what part of the package he was for that deal. I keep alluding to it. We'll talk about it. But we got to talk about these New Jersey Devils. We got to talk about my boy, Pyotr Kochetkov. Finally getting that name right, Steel. You know, I've been practicing that in the mirror at night just to make sure I got it. 4-year, $8 million contract. Look, this 23-year-old goalie, there's a lot to like about him. How about last season in the AHL to start? 13-3-1 during the regular season, helping them in Chicago in the AHL to a Calder Cup, and was 5-1 in 6 playoff games. I know the track record in the NHL is small, but when I see Rob Brindamore come out in Carolina, head coach, talk about this kid. Also, Frederik, Andersen, and Antti Raanta, both UFAs at the end of this season, you can't help but feel, given how good the rest of this team is, Steele, they might just go with Kochetkov and load up on some other players up front and see what happens.
I think that's the likely case here, signing that 4-year, $8 million deal with the Hurricanes as well. And like you said, Antti Raanta and Freddie Andersen are UFAs at the end of this season. So it's most likely that at least one of them, if not both, will be out of Carolina. And soon enough, this will be Kochetkov's team. And like you said, he has some great results in the KHL, some great results in the AHL as well. And this is definitely a goalie I will be keeping my eyes on 100% for next year's season's fantasy league draft as well. And I know he's your boy, so I might pick him just before you, just to put the little banter in there as well. But he's been phenomenal in the 4 games he's played with. He hasn't lost in regulation this season as well, and his stats are just incredible.
And there is obviously already a lot to like about this Carolina Hurricanes team. And say what you want about the future of the team, it looks good right now in terms of their product on the ice. That Metro division is a little bit up and down right now, but we know the Carolina Hurricanes are going to be in the mix over the next couple of years, just based on the fact of Sebastian Aho, Brent Burns, and other pieces that they have in tow for the next couple of years. And I don't know about you, Steele, but given the landscape of goaltending over the last couple of seasons, why not run out a guy for $2 million a season and see what you can get before sinking all kinds of money into 2 veteran guys who have been hurt a lot? So this is his crease, in my opinion. But I need to talk about a couple of other things. We're going to get to the New Jersey Devils. We're going to get to our underachievers. I feel different about not saying we're getting to big time bets, but that's okay because we're giving thanks. We're also going to give thanks to our friends at betonline.net. Your number one source for sports betting info, stats, news, and analysis this season. Whilst you're enjoying your turkey, stuffing, and otherwise this holiday season, go grab the latest odds and trends for every professional and amateur league out there, from football to basketball to soccer and even esports. They have you covered at betonline.net. And if you love sports podcasts just like this one, you can find all of the others at BetOnline as well, where they are the fastest and easiest way to get your betting fix all season long. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more. BetOnline, where the game starts.
Thank you so much for making the Locked On Fantasy Hockey Podcast your first listen every single day. Please check out the Locked On Sports Today podcast after you do for this one. The biggest stories of the day, instant reactions, big game recaps, and the take of the day, available on the Odyssey app, YouTube, and wherever you get your podcasts. And like Flip said beforehand, we're going to get to our top 3 underachievers. We're going to get to the trade that just happened a few days ago in our fantasy league. But we got to talk about these New Jersey Devils on an absolute tear so far. And, we are recording this just a little bit early on Wednesday, so we don't know how that game between the Devils and Maple Leafs ended out. But as of right now, they are on this 13-game winning streak. If they do beat the Leafs, it becomes a franchise record 14th win in a row in a season. And they're only 4 wins away from tying the 92-93 Penguins, who had a 17-game win streak, the most in NHL history. Absolutely incredible. But what are your thoughts on this win streak? Do you think they can get to 17? Like this, to me, this is just absolutely incredible what they're doing.
It really is, Steele. And like you said, thank you for mentioning the caveat of we record early, people, so we don't really know what happened. The game's in tow right now, so we'll see what shakes out. But you just mentioned a special team. I think you said 92-93 Penguins. I'm pretty sure that included a couple of guys named Mario Lemieux and Jaromir Jagr on that team doing incredibly Hall of Fame-like things. I don't know what's going to shake out for some of these players, and I'm not ready to put Nico Hischier and Jesper Bratt in the Hall of Fame just yet. But if they continue on this tear, there's something about Nico Hischier that just makes me appreciate his game. He gets it done quietly, Steele. And at this day and age, there's not many players that just get it done. He celebrates quietly. He's quiet on and off the ice. And sometimes, like ninjas, you move in silence and you get it done. And I love this kid's game. Nico Hischier impressing me. And now all of a sudden also, Dawson Mercer starting to heat up, a player that you and I were both very high on last year. And that's what I think has impressed me the most, aside from those step outs. We talked about Jack Hughes staying healthy. That was a really good point on yours. They're getting it done on all lines, and they're getting it done now with Vitek Vanacek having some confidence. Hey, why not the New Jersey Devils this year, Steele? This is impressive stuff, top to bottom.
Yeah, they're definitely not a deep playoff Stanley Cup contending team, but they will probably be in the playoff picture at least the first round or second round with how good they're playing. And like you said, they're getting it done from every single player on the ice that I can think of. Hischier, Hughes, and Bratt leading the way. All three of those guys have 20-plus points so far this season. Dougie Hamilton is that elite defenseman that the Devils have been looking for the longest time now. He's proving it as well this season. Veteran presence from Thomas Tatar, who's chipping in. The fourth and third liners, like you mentioned, chipping in as well. We talked about them just a few episodes ago. But as you said, Vanacek, Blackwood, who is still out with injury. But even now, Akira Schmid, who has been in the lineup for the last 4 games. All 3 of the goalies they've played so far this season are putting up phenomenal stats. So they're getting it done from every single category you could think of on their roster.
Also, top 10 penalty kill, tied for second in the NHL in goal scoring overall. Lots to like about this New Jersey Devils team. Can they get it done in a nitty-gritty playoff series against some of these teams who have been there before? The New York Rangers, perhaps. The Boston Bruins would be an interesting matchup for this team in the first round. I don't know what's going to happen come the end of the season. All I know is if this team can continue to flex this confidence, because that's really one of the takeaways I see. They are playing with confidence, and they're missing Andre Palat, and you mentioned the missing of Mackenzie Blackwood as well. Hey, man, let's just see what happens here. Let's quickly talk about this trade, Steele, because I want to talk about these underachievers as well, because as much as it might not be a sexy conversation, I have a feeling some of the players you and I are talking about might be in line for a come up over the next few months. So let's get to that conversation after we talk about this trade. That obviously involves Mr. Ehlers.
Yeah, it does involve Nikolai Ehlers, and we might have mentioned it on a couple, last week's episodes as well, where I got offered a trade for Jack Eichel and Nikolai Ehlers, and at the time there was no news about the timetable. There was no news about when he potentially might return. A few days later, the offer was Nikolai Ehlers, Jack Eichel, who were on my team, and I would be receiving Jonathan Marchessault, Ricard Raquel, and Charlie McAvoy. And at the time of this, I was like, you know what? We don't know what the timetable is yet. I'm going to say no. He might come back in the next couple of weeks because he had returned to skating. Unfortunately, the news comes out just a day after I rejected this trade that he was out indefinitely. So a little bit of a bum news for me, but nonetheless, I get offered the same deal again. Jack Eichel and Nikolai Ehlers for Marchessault, Raquel, and McAvoy. I ended up taking the deal. I accepted it. And then again, just a day later, or I guess as of today or yesterday, the news comes out that he's will be returning in 6 to 8 weeks minimum. So it does hurt a little bit to see, but that's a guy out for 2 months. As of right now, I'm okay with it. I definitely needed the more shots, the more hits, and the blocks, which I'm going to get from all 3 of the players I got. But it was really hard to leave to trade away Jack Eichel from my team. I have him on all 3 of my fantasy teams because that's how high valued I thought he was this season. He's proving it this season as well. Yes. So what do you think about the trade right now? And what do you think about that?
I think it's obvious that this person who is acquiring Jack Eichel from you has a very serious love going for a player who, I won't deny, has had a sensational all-star-like season for a Golden Knights team who is also being impressive over the first chunk of the season. But look, maybe he did the research, or he or she, I don't know, they did the research on Nikolai Ehlers and had some insider info from someone deep in the Winnipeg territory. By the way, Winnipeg, slushy capital of Canada. They love their 7-Eleven out there. That's a fact. Yeah. Shout out to Winnipeg. But Nikolai Ehlers, this trade steal, you won in a home run. I understand the love for Jack Eichel, and he is the big piece in this trade. McAvoy fills out a ton of categories. Yeah. Those kinds of defensemen right there are hard to come by, and he has a good start coming back for a great team. Marchessault, like I said, sometimes when you deal a big player on a team, let's say for the Golden Knights, and then they put up a 7 spot, and you look at that stat board and you go, man, I wish I had a piece of the Golden Knights, at least with Marchessault. When they have a big night, Marchessault is going to have a point or two, so that helps you there. And the last player with Raquel, and this is a nice interlude to one of my underachievers in a sec, getting slotted up that lineup now, playing with Gensel and Crosby. Steele, there is so much to like about that trade. I don't see any underachievers in that group just yet. So I love the trade for you. I understand, hey, Ehlers comes back and goes on a heater. That might suck, but I think you won the trade far out. If you don't mind, I alluded to that underachiever. If you don't mind, I'm going to head over to that conversation right now.
Let's do it.
Since
We're these
also
three
because,
underachievers.
Thank you very much. I mentioned the slotting up of the lineup for Rickard Rakell. Bryan Rust has not been nearly good enough for me this season. I think he's been underachieving hugely, and we just mentioned that opportunity he's getting to play with Seider and Gensel, two guys who have been clearly getting it done over the last number of seasons. Also, Bryan Rust being a benefactor of those two. 56 points 2020, 42 points in a shortened 21 season, and 58 points last season. 5 goals and 5 assists playing with Sidney Crosby. How good he's been, Steele. This guy's underachieving.
Yeah, he definitely has been underachieving, and we knew this was going to happen, especially that they were able to manipulate their lineups a little bit because of adding Rickard Rakell last season. They were trying to get the chemistry with him and Evgeny Malkin, but like you said, it's a little shocking that Rust is not producing as much, especially when Crosby, we just talked about him, has 27 points in 18 or 19 games so far this season. So that's a little bit ridiculous right there to see for Bryan Rust. Definitely underachieving. We will continue with this talk on the top 3 underachievers. But again, thank you so much for making the Locked On Fantasy Hockey Podcast your first listen every day. Please check out Locked On Sports Today podcast, the biggest stories, instant reactions, big game recaps, and the take of the day. Available on all podcast networks you can think of, and the Odyssey app and YouTube. Flip, if you don't mind, though, my list might actually be a little bit different here. And this first player does hit a little bit home, so I might be a little biased here. But my first underachiever is actually Andrei Vasilevskiy. And I've talked about him at length with you. I've talked about him on Twitter as well with a couple of rants. He's played 14 games so far this season. So back last year, in the 14 games, for the 14 starts that he played in, he was 8-3-3 with a .916 save percentage and a 2.42 goals against average. Pretty good stats right now, Not bad. There. So far this season, he's 7-6-1. He has a 903 save percentage and a 3 goals against average. So a little bit different there. It's not overall bad, but for me, he's looked like a shell of his true self. I've talked about this at length. The amount of goalies, not just him, but the amount of goalies that are letting the puck in on the first shot of the game has been absolutely ridiculous to see so far this season. He's done it a handful of times. He has not looked great so far this season, in my opinion. And this is one of the guys that I really do think in the next couple of months, we can expect the pure 100% talent of Andrei Vasilevskiy like we saw the last 2 cup runs.
There has been way too many impressive performances and hardware on this guy's mantle for me to even get overly concerned. You're spot on with him not playing enough or not playing well enough. But the fact remains is he is a top 3, top 2 goalie still. I'm not giving up on him.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah, no, but you're right, Steele. That's just how good he's been. It's underachieving. Most goalies, those stats you're reaming off, they're feeling okay about themselves. There's room for improvement, couple of bad games, couple of muffins, but there's those growing pains, especially with younger goalies. Andrei Vasilevskiy, this is almost completely unacceptable given his track record and the amount of trophies, like I said, that this guy gets to look at every night while he's staring at the old mantelpiece. But I think you're going to see some better hockey from Andrei Vasilevskiy. That's just bound to happen. This player does special things. You don't give up on a guy like that. But talking about others, special players, not as much track record nearly, but what we saw from Moritz Seider last year. And maybe I'm not going to talk about underachieving on the ice because I know he's been pretty good if you're talking about just a general hockey standpoint. But in terms of his production and especially fantasy value, he's been underachieving. Look, 3 assists in his last game, a goal in the game before, Before that, he only had 3 points. So definitely underachieving before the last 2 games. Maybe Steele, this is a sign of him picking up because, like I said, before the last 2 games, so he's got 4 points in his last 2 games. Before that, 4 points in the previous 16. Last year, 50 points. I think there is so much more to come from Moritz Seider this year, but he has definitely been underachieving, Steele, and maybe this is one of those spots that you can buy low on Moritz Seider, kick some tires on some GMs that need a little bit of boost in offense, and thank me later when Moritz Seider goes on an absolute heater.
Yeah, I've actually tried, like you said, trying to buy him low earlier on in the season, but there's a lot of people out there that are still high on this kid. Like you and I, he's going to be a really, really good defenseman for the Detroit Red Wings and probably for many, many years. But you're right, a very sluggish start to his season, especially from what the production was last year. And people are very hard to trade on him because of how young he is and how talented he is. But I'm going to continue with another goalie actually for underachieving. And there's no question that this guy has probably been the worst starting goalie this season. We just talked about him a couple episodes ago, but Jack Campbell has been the worst starting goaltender so far this season. 6-4-0 this season. The stats are atrocious.
That goals against average is gnarly.
Oh, it is absolutely brutal for Jack Campbell and the Edmonton Oilers. All 4 of his losses can put the blame right on his head. That is all his fault. The amount of times that he's looked at his glove saying, where did that go? Did it go through the mesh? The fact that the Edmonton Oilers are in 5th in the Pacific Division, they're 10-9-0. All 4 of those losses could be put on Jack Campbell's head right there. And he's just not been great. To me, he's a lot of the sole reason why they're not in the top 3 in the Pacific.
I talked a little bit on yesterday's episode. By the way, pal, I missed you yesterday. Sometimes talking to yourself is not so easy. I missed you yesterday big time. But I talked about the situation in Edmonton between Stuart Skinner and Jack Campbell.
Yeah.
Sometimes statistics and goaltenders don't exactly mean a lot. And when I look at a goals against average, it could be sometimes indicative of how bad the team has been around him. The Edmonton Oilers allow, I believe, the 4th most shots in the NHL, 4th or 5th most. They could have been better in some of those games, but I'm not buying that. Jack Campbell needs to be better because also his save percentage is awful. He has not been good. And that is more of an indicative stat of usually, in my opinion, of how a goaltender truly is performing. He just needs to figure it out. Multi-year deal, $25 million contract. I don't know about you, Steele, but I don't think the Edmonton Oilers really care who's in net because Stuart Skinner's looked like the better goalie. And in my opinion, if I'm Connor McDavid talking to the coaching staff, they better figure it out quick or I'm going to start considering playing elsewhere.
Look, I bet you the Leafs right now are laughing that they didn't offer that $5 million 5-year deal and that the Edmonton Oilers did because you're exactly right. Stuart Skinner has been better. I wouldn't say a lot better. That he has been a little bit streaky as well, but he has been the better goalie for sure for Edmonton. And if they can get at least one of these guys to stay consistent, they're going to be a top 3 team in the Pacific. But with the way Vegas, LA, Seattle, even Calgary, who's been struggling a little bit, it's going to be tough for them if they can't figure out their goaltending situation yet again for another year.
Thank you for mentioning the goaltending situation. I had an honorable mention on my list other than the player I'm going to talk to next because I had my top 3. The honorable mention that I think a player can do a lot better and has been underachieving to a point, aside from his bad team in front of him, Tristan Jarry, in my opinion, can be a lot better. And looking at these numbers over the past couple of years, I think you and I, one of the first things we agreed on is Tristan Jarry is one of those underrated goalies on the come up. And then this season, he seems to have regressed or almost leveled off a little bit. And looking at the numbers, 327 goals against, 904 save percentage, and only 1 shutout. I know he's played better, and a 6-3 overall record isn't too bad. 2 overtime losses, though, and I just think he can be better. That was my honorable mention. I'm glad you appreciate that. But Andrew Mangiapane, after a 35-goal season last year, 3 goals on a Calgary Flames team that I know lost the players they lost, but they gained Nazem Kadri and Jonathan Huberdeau. They're starting to kind of figure it out a little bit. Mangiapane has not. 3 goals in 18 games is not good enough for what I've seen from this player and the opportunity that he's had in Calgary over the last couple of seasons. to me, also I'm biased or jaded, I should say, because I drafted this player. But Mangiapane needs to be much better. And if I were you out there, I would already have been fine with giving up on him, just like I did.
And I will continue with the underachievers for the Calgary Flames because my last player is Jonathan Huberdeau as well.
Had to be said.
It had to be said. It absolutely, I know it's a new setting for him, but it's just, again, like I said for Vasilevsky, a shell of his true self. 115 points last year with the Panthers. And we obviously know that he wasn't going to put up those stats again, coming to obviously a new country, playing with a new organization, getting the feel and the chemistry. He only has 3 goals, 9 points in 15 games this season. And for me, I'm not really seeing that pure domination, multi-point games of where he just takes over for the team. And he can use that incredible vision and sense of where his players are on the ice to find them and set them up. And like you said, things have been turning around for Huberdeau and Kadri a little bit recently. He's got 4 points in his last 5 games. But for me, he is so far off the productive rates from the last few seasons. And that is a guy that I expect to be a lot better in the next few months.
You've also just never really seen him not be confident at any place I've ever seen him play. World Juniors, junior level, on the come up in Florida. He has been that guy that just plays with poise and confidence. And this is what happens when you lose your confidence a little bit, maybe, Steele. That's my take with this player, because obviously the skills, the hands, the feet, and the vision are all there with Huberdeau. Just might be a little bit upstairs. And I think you mentioned the points moving from Florida, going from South Florida out to Alberta, little different. Going cross border, playing for Sutter, little different. So all these things I think have factored in. I'm glad that you had him on here because I literally closed the tab on Huberdeau thinking you for sure did. It had to be mentioned. He might be the biggest underachiever considering how good he was last year. But all of these players, people, and this is my last little sidebar for this, maybe go out there and buy low. Maybe go out there and see if you can acquire them. Keep your eye on them. If they continue to even slip for a little bit, jump on them because they won't be slipping for that much, except for Mangiapane. I don't know. I don't believe that he's going to figure it out. He might be the only one that I think is a lost cause. Bryan Rust also maybe in that conversation, but otherwise, that's what I'm feeling. Steele, take it away, brother.
Let us know in the comments what you think of our underachievers. Let us know in the comments as well of what you thought of that trade I just accepted between Ehlers, Eichel for Marchessault, Raquel, and McAvoy. Please leave a comment. We really do appreciate it. And thank you so much for making the Locked On Fantasy Hockey Podcast your first listen every single day. Once again, please check out Locked On Sports Today podcast, available on the Odyssey app, YouTube, and wherever you get your podcast. Thank you so much for tuning in for today's episode with Flip and I. Have a great day. There are no bets, so no good luck for your bets tonight, and we shall see you back here again tomorrow.
Happy Thanksgiving, y'all.